Okie dokie, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to week three's webinar. So, if you are watching this as a webinar replay, then like normal, we're going to be getting things rolling in a couple of minutes. I just wanted to obviously start things up a couple of minutes ahead of time so that people can actually receive the email and then go ahead and click on it and join the webinar through the link that I just sent out. So, let me just do some house cleaning type stuff, or housekeeping, I should say, not house cleaning. I'm making sure that my microphone is on and selected properly. I see that my line is coming through nicely, and I've got my questions lined up. Again, we've only had 2 questions come in, but anyway, that's fine. At least we had some questions, so I'll go ahead and answer those. So I'm just going to wait maybe another, 60 seconds or so-ish, and then that will be 2 p.m., which is our scheduled start time for this webinar, and then we can get things rolling. So I'm just going to put myself on mute for the next probably 60 seconds or so, and then we will get things rolling. So see you then. Alrighty, so we are at 2 p.m. The email has gone out, and I believe some of you are on their way into the webinar, so I'm just going to go ahead and start things off, because if you join late, you can always listen to it again after the session is over. I'll be posting it on the dbvideotutorials.com website under the webinar tab, so you'll be able to click there and see this webinar. So, the first question that came in of the two, like I said, we only had 2 questions come in. Again, you guys don't seem to be really devoted to this thing right now, or you're doing just fine and you're understanding everything that I'm teaching, in which case that's phenomenal. So I'll keep going with these 2 questions and then move on to just the announcement for the stuff coming up. So question number 1 was, what exactly is a schema in SQL speak? And that's a good question. I guess there's more than 2 questions. I guess there's 3 questions, or maybe more. Look at this, 4 questions. Might as well just expand them into being 4 questions. How about that? So question number 1 is, what exactly is a schema in SQL speak? Well, it's kind of, a schema is it sort of in my opinion, it represents the sort of design of your database. Okay, I call it the database schema. But there's also, you can refer to them as table schemas as well, because a overall database design is how all the tables interact with each other. But then there's the table itself, which is how the table itself is designed. So a schema is really just another word for the design of the database or the table itself. Okay, it's kind of synonymous in those 2 regards, in those 2 aspects. So when I'm talking about, when I say schema, I tend to mean the actual interaction between the tables as well as the tables themselves. So it's kind of synonymous. So for example, if I were to go to one of these tables that I have listed, let's say the transactions table, and double click on it, you can take a look at the schema for the table, which is the layout of all the columns and the information within it. So these are the column names. This is the type for the columns. You can see whether or not there are keys or constraints defined on any of them, and so on and so forth. And you can go through it and look at all the things. If there's an index, if there's, like I said, a constraint or a trigger or what have you. I haven't talked about many of these things in the course at all, so don't worry if you don't understand these concepts just yet. But this is just the overview of talking about what the term schema really means. Now, in some other IDEs, like I'm using Toad, which is what I use for my SQL, programming and whatnot, if you can call it programming. There's also another IDE that's called the Workbench, the Workbench that comes with MySQL itself. When you go to create a new table, like for me, if I right-click and say Create Table, I believe in their terminology, in their sort of world, for the MySQL Workbench, they call it Create a Schema. Okay, so what they mean by that is just another table. Okay, at least that's what I remember from it being when I used MySQL Workbench way back in the past. So schema is a fairly flexible word to use, and that's, I think, where the confusion comes from, is because it's kind of used interchangeably between the database design itself and the relationships between the tables, as well as the design of the table itself and the fields inside of it and the data types and so on and so forth. Okay, so when I just say schema, I just mean how the thing is designed, how it looks, how it functions, and that kind of thing, that kind of idea. Okay, so that's what a schema is in SQL speak. Number two, and let's see, they have, okay, I've seen this used both ways, and in experimenting both seem to work equally well. I have seen explicit tables called out like so with these quotes, and then also without the quotes. So, but both work, so why use the single quotes? This is another fantastic question, and as luck would have it, I just recorded a video today for week number 4, where I had, or I guess week 4, or maybe week 5, I guess, where I was almost going to talk about this, and then I was like, oh, should I really even talk about it right now? And I kind of fumbled back and forth, but I guess, hey, I'll be talking about it in this webinar now, so I might as well just mention it in the next episode or next lesson that I record. In any case, funny coincidence. So the quotes are something that you can use in MySQL, and I've prepared a bit of an example over here that sort of explains what the heck is going on with it. So what happens is the single quotes, these are actually not single quotes, they're actually called backticks, and it's the key to the left of the number 1 key on your keyboard. If you have a standard US or North American, whatever you call it, keyboard, it's above the tab key and to the left of the number 1 on your keyboard. If you just hit it, that's what's what they call a backtick, as opposed to a single quote. So if I were to type in 2 single quotes, they would appear like this in red. If I were to type in 2 backticks, they appear in gray, and they're slightly on an angle, if you will. So there's a difference between a single quote and a backtick. The difference between them is using backticks allow you to use reserved words and other sort of symbols that you would not normally be able to use. So for example, I'm going to alter my transaction table, and I'm going to try to add a column. And again, if you guys aren't familiar with this terminology, that's all perfectly okay. I think I just published the series, a video on this right today. Let me just go and really quickly check to make sure that is indeed the case. I'm just kind of flipping through my screen off of the actual screen that you're seeing, so don't worry if you don't see anything happening right now. Let me see. Ooh, maybe I don't have it in there just yet. Okay, so not this week, but next week you'll be learning about this syntax of altering tables if you haven't already seen it. So don't worry too much about it if you don't understand what the heck is going on. What you should worry about is the point behind it, which is what it's used for. So I'm going to try to add a column to this table. Okay, that's essentially what this script is going to be doing. I'm adding a new column to the table, and the name of the column is going to be a reserved word inside of SQL. And I'm using the word column as the word that should represent the name of my column. Okay, but you see it's a reserved word. It appears in blue, and that's obviously probably not going to work. So if I click on this or select it and hit F5 to run it, you see it says you have an error in your SQL syntax. Please check the manual, blah, blah, blah. So this is not working. However, if I use these backticks, like so, you see that the blue color now changes to a black color. And if I run this, it now allows me to do it. So you see at the very bottom here, it spit out a thing saying 0 rows affected, and it gives me my alter table transaction line that I just talked about. So let me clear that. And if I do a select star from transaction, you see that the column is now in existence. It now appears inside of my table. So that's what the backticks are for. They allow you to use reserved words and other perhaps symbols. Like I think you could even get away with putting a question mark. So let me just drop that column now. Let me delete that column so it's no longer there. And let me do a select star so you see it's not there anymore. Let me do a question mark and see if it allows me to do that. Oh, that's interesting. It's asking me to bind a variable. That is not at all what I meant to have happen. Let me try changing it to an exclamation mark and see what happens there. Okay, 0 rows affected. So now you see that my column has an exclamation mark in it. Whereas I don't believe you would be able to do that without the backticks. Let me drop that column. Let me do the select to make sure that it's dropped. Yes, indeed, it's gone. Let me get rid of the backticks. And let me do this again. And sure enough, it doesn't let me. Now let me try changing the reserved word just to play around with this, because I'm actually just curious to see if you can use an exclamation mark. So no, it does not allow you to use an exclamation mark, I believe, until you use the backticks, which I'll use now, and then run it again. And it looks like it worked properly. If I run this, then sure enough, it's in there properly, and so on and so forth. And then you can drop it, and then select and see that it's dropped. So there you go. That's what the backticks are used for. So really, I mean, in practice, it's not. I believe that you should never use the backticks, because if you're using backticks to make your query work, that might mean that you're doing something that sort of is pushing the limits of the standards, pushing the limits of the conventions. So therefore, it's probably not a good thing to do. So I mean, it's perfectly allowed in terms of syntax for you to use backticks, and you can use them anywhere. You can use them in a select statement. You could say select star from transaction, and let me say select, okay, transaction ID, and you can put backticks here for each of the column names, and bank account ID, and so on and so forth, and run that, and that'll run just fine. Or you can run it without them and run it again, and it works just fine. And you know, the whole reason is because those would be allowing for those bad characters to be inside of the names of the columns, or whatever, even the names of the tables. You could even use it for the tables as well for it to work. So that's what the backticks are for, and they're not the greatest thing in the whole world, so I would avoid using them in terms of, you know, creating tables or creating either tables or column names with bad names and stuff. So anyway, I've beat that to the death. So there you have it. That's what these backticks are all about. Now, number 3, similarly, I've seen examples where strings are enclosed in double quotes and others in single quotes, as I taught. Again, both ways seem to work, so what is the nuance of when you want to use one versus the other? I didn't realize, or did I realize, I forget now, if you could use the double quote. So if I say select star from transaction, where transaction date is equal to, and then if I use the double quotes and say 2014 0611 and run that, oh, okay, they do work. So that's interesting. I think maybe I came from the background of using Microsoft SQL Server a lot, and in Microsoft SQL Server they do not allow double quotes. But apparently they do allow it in MySQL, and I do honestly believe that there is no difference between the two. If I were to give you the piece of advice, or if I were to give you the idea of the convention, I would definitely stick with using single quotes, just because that's what other database languages like not MySQL, but SQL Server or Oracle, I believe they both require you to use single quotes, not the double quotes. Okay, so just sort of get into the habit of using the single quote, and you'll be just fine. Okay, cool. So let me see here. I have been playing around with setting the query cache size. Look at this. This particular gentleman is very advanced setting the cache size. But it expects numbers. I was going to set it with global blah blah and this number, but it's to set it at 16 megs, but it did not like that number, and instead it was looking for this number, which he apparently got in a Google search. So good for you, Mr. Gentleman, who shall remain unnamed, for doing a Google search. I really love that. That's exactly how you should go about solving a lot of problems. Of course, I'm still here to help if you need it. I'm more than happy to. Anyway, what I was wondering is, what is the mathematics behind getting to that number? I know somehow it involves blah, 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 but otherwise I'm baffled. Okay, so this comes to sort of a talk about machines and machine code. Machines and CPUs work with ones and zeros. Ones and zeros, ones and zeros, ones and zeros. These ones and zeros are referred to as bits. Okay? There's bits, there's bytes, there's megabytes, there's gigabytes. Okay? So there are bits, bytes, megabytes, gigabytes, etc., etc. So let me do this. Bits, byte. 1 byte is equal to 8 bits. Okay? 1 megabyte is equal to 1,000 bytes. 1 gigabyte is equal to, or sorry, is that true? 1,000 bytes, or is it 1,024? I believe it's 1,024. Sorry, I'm getting myself confused here. 1 gigabyte is equal to 1,024 megabytes. Is that true? 1,024? I believe that's the case. So if I got this wrong, I extremely apologize. This has been a long time since I've done this math. But in any case, the whole point is bits are equal to 0 or 1. Okay? So how do you make this work? So because they wanted this cache size to be set to 16 megabytes. I believe that, and they had to do it in such a fashion that it was done like this with this giant number here. I believe that it is working. MySQL is working in bits. Okay, so if you want to figure out what 16 megabytes is, I think you need to do it in terms of bits. At least I believe that is how it's working. So because I did this, when you use bits, they are done in powers of 2, and that's because in terms of using bits, the bits are on a, what is it called, a two-digit system? Oh, what the heck is it called? 10 decimal place, not decimal place. It's been so long since I've done this. I should have prepared for this question. I actually didn't prepare for this question because I thought I knew it off the top of my head, and clearly I don't. Base 2. There we go. Bits is in a base 2 numbering system, whereas whereas our numbering system is in a base 10. So base 2 is equal to the bits numbering system, and base 10 is equal to our numbering system. So base 10 means you have numbers 0 through to 9, which is 10 different numbers. Whereas with bits, since it's a base 2 numbering system, there's only 2 numbers, which is 0 or 1. So because bits and computers are in a base 2 numbering system, you can only represent numbers using 2 different digits, which turns it into a power of 2 system. Okay, just like our system, you can use a power of 10 system. This is a power of 2 system. So if I wanted to represent the number 1 in bits, in base 2, it's just the number 1. If I wanted to represent the number 2, it's actually the number 10 because it's in a base 2 system. So because the number 1 is in the second position, you use 2 to the power of 2, which is equal to 4. If I wanted to represent the number 8, I would write it like this, because 2 to the power of 3 is 8, and so on and so forth. 2 to the power of 4, because there's 4 digits, is 16. So this is how you write the number 16 in a numbering, the base 2 numbering system, which is the binary system, and so on and so forth. You can keep adding digits, and this is 2 to the power of 5, which is, what is that, 32, and so on and so forth. So what it ends up being is, I think it was, what, 2 to the power of, so 2 to the power of 26, no, 24 maybe, 2 to the power of 24, there we go. So 2 to the power of 24 is the 16 megabytes that we're talking about. Okay, so that is literally 1 with 23 zeros after it. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18, 19, 20, 21, 22, 23. I believe that is how you write out the number that you see here, 16,777,216 in binary. And I can go out on a limb and see if I can prove this by changing. Can I change this into a science or programmer calculator and change this into a binary numbering system? And then I will paste in that number and then change it back to decimal. So I didn't do that correctly. Let me add one more zero. Clear that. Back to binary, paste that in there, change it back to decimal, and there you go. So that is the 16,777,216. Okay, so that is why that's where that number comes from, because that's how the computer works. It's in a base 2 numbering system, and that's how you get to 16 megabytes, because there are 8 bits in a byte, and so on and so forth. So that's how that math works out. Okay, if I really wanted to go backwards, then I can turn this. This is in megabytes. So if I divide this by, how would I do this? Divide this by 1024, divided by 1024, and that turns it from megabytes into bytes. And then I divide this by 8, and that's how many bits I believe would need. Am I doing that correctly? I could just be completely losing it, but is that in any case, I'm just confusing myself now, but that's where that number comes from, and that's why that number is in existence. So it looks like someone is telling me in the chat, units 2 to the power of 0, 10 is equal to 1 to the power of 2 plus so I'm not exactly sure what the gentleman is referring to in the comments, but hopefully that answered the question of where that number came from and why you need to set it like it is. If that doesn't answer your question, let me know in the actual chat room itself. If you have any other questions, let me know. I know that wasn't exactly the best explanation, but that's more or less where that comes from. And you can always go back to Google if you need help figuring out how else to set it into a different numbering system, like a 32 megabyte or what have you. Okay. So let me go into the final thing I want to talk about for today, which is just an announcement saying that, let me pull this over here. We have Module 3 is now available. I just put that up today. So you can go through Module 3 now and go through. And if you have any questions as you're going through and learning about joins and grouping and aggregate functions and the having keyword and ordering and how to do a select into, which is pretty cool stuff. This will save you a lot of time if you are using big tables and big data and whatnot, so very important one to understand. But if you have any questions about any of these things as you're going through them, please go to the support section, click on support, and then you can submit a question via the support system here. Give me your name. I guess you have to give me your email address, but if you don't want to give me your actual email address, you can put a fake one in there. It's okay, because I'm just going to be talking about the answers inside of the webinar. Unless you want me to get back to you right away, then let me know and obviously give me a proper email address and send me your message. Okay, so this is what you need to do to be able to get your messages and get your questions onto the webinars itself, so that in the next webinar, which is next Thursday, which will be Thursday, September 25th, that will be our second last webinar. Okay, so the September 25th will be supporting, okay, the questions from Module 1 all the way to Module 3. So even if you don't have any questions related to Module 3, if you have questions related to Module 1 or 2, that's perfectly fine too. Send me your questions and I will gladly answer them. Okay, so long as they're mostly on topic. For everyone else, then I will definitely try to answer. I will answer them on the webinar. If they are sort of off topic and I happen to have the knowledge related to that, then I will go ahead and answer that question for you. Some of you were sort of asking questions about Java and stuff like that, which is perfectly fine. I mean, some of the audience here came from my Java video tutorial stuff, so I'm more than happy to answer their Java questions. But I'm not going to do that on the webinars because that sort of doesn't apply to everybody in the course. So having said that, Module 3 is available. Go through the stuff, get learning, ask me the questions, because like I said, next webinar will be on the 25th at 2 p.m., same time as it is now, 2 p.m. Eastern time. I will also be posting assignment number 3 next Wednesday. So that will be what, on the 24th, I'll be putting up the next assignment, and that will be in relation to Module 3 and testing your knowledge in Module 3. And then finally, I'll be releasing Module 4 videos and a lot of the bonus videos. I'm going to start recording and getting them into the bonus section so that you guys can get up and running with those bonus videos that I've promised you. All right? So let me just flip back to the chat room. Where is it? I've lost it. Here it is. There are no other questions coming in, so I will assume you guys are good to go, all hunky-dory, and I look forward to seeing you hopefully in the next webinar, and I urge you, please, please, please send me your questions. Don't be shy. I'm here to help. All right? Take care, guys. Happy learning, and bye for now.